So if everybody could please take your seats. The concert's about to start.
Just tested in horseback.
What did you all think of that last panel discussion? Very good. Well, I'm going to introduce Samantha Godwin of the National Lawyers Guild at Georgetown Law School. The National Lawyers Guild at Georgetown has been kind enough to provide hosting for this conference to make accessible the facilities here to law students here and members of the faculty as well as members of the broader community. And really want to thank you very much for all your work in making this conference possible.
Thanks so much. So I'm here to introduce our keynote speaker, but before I do, I just wanted to give a very brief plug to my organization, the National Lawyers Guild. We are a progressive bar association founded in 1937 to advance human rights over property interests, and we're dedicated to fundamental change in our political and economic structure. And we're open to lawyers, law school students, and legal workers. So if you fit into any of those categories, please join. It's a great group, great network of people using law for social justice and advancing the public good. So our keynote speaker today is Jeremy Scahill, an investigative journalist and author of the best-selling Blackwater, The Rise of the Most Powerful Mercenary Army. Jeremy has reported from occupied Iraq and covered the 1999 NATO bombing campaign against Yugoslavia. He's a correspondent for Democracy Now! And a frequent contributor to The Nation, and he's been around the country in campuses and television discussing private mercenaries and their role in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, Jeremy Scahill. Yeah.
I feel like people in a way are sort of being punished because I spoke last night and now you have to listen to me again. So I apologize for that in advance. Thank you to Ben Mansky and Sarah Mansky for inviting me to this conference, and thank you to all of you that came from very far away. Someone from Hawaii is here, which is probably got to be the furthest away of anyone here. I want to talk. I'm going to talk in sort of great detail about the role that mercenary companies are currently playing within the Obama administration's national security structure or war machine, and also some of the historical context, how we ended up getting to a position where a full 50% of the personnel that are occupying Iraq and are engaged in Afghanistan actually come from for-profit corporations and are drawn from over 100 nations around the world. This has to be one of the most, if not the most, internationalized war in history, in the sense that these private companies have been used to effectively replace nation-state allies in U.S. wars that are incredibly unpopular across the globe. But first I wanted to give a sort of overview of where we stand right now on issues of accountability. I know that David Swanson, who his great new book, Daybreak, is available out there, is going to talk at length about this, so I'll just make some brief remarks on it. I think that when we saw the President of the United States make the statement that we should be looking forwards, not backwards, we crossed a very, very dangerous line. And when people get pulled over by the police, if they're speeding or something, I think they should say that to the cops. Well, officer, let's look forward, not backwards at my speeding. In fact, I was going to use that line when I recently was pulled over in Madison, Wisconsin, but it turned out that the police officer was a left-winger, which was quite ironic, only in Madison. But on this issue of holding torturers accountable, I was recently on Bill Maher's show, Real Time, with an elite journalist, Chuck Todd, who is part of the sort of cocktail clique of White House correspondents. And I monitor, I'm sort of a glutton for punishment, I monitor corporate media outlets regularly. I pretty much watch them all day while I'm doing other things. I have them on the background. So I feel like I'm sort of a student of Chuck Todd and Wolf Blitzer and all these people. I don't know them personally, but I feel like I do in the sense that I see them every day. And after the election, with all of the huge screens with the state maps and the fancy graphics and all that stuff, Chuck Todd somehow emerged as this expert on everything in the United States, and things that he knows absolutely nothing about. And he stands there in front of the White House, quote unquote, reporting about what's happening within the administration. And I oftentimes find it hard to distinguish between Chuck Todd and Robert Gibbs. Chuck Todd likes to use the word "we" to describe the United States government. And I'm wondering if he's talking about General Electric, or he's talking about NBC, or he in fact is talking about the White House. And you see this sort of culture of coziness that exists between many of the journalists, particularly those that sit in the front row at the press briefings. And one morning I was watching Chuck Todd discussing the calls for accountability and for prosecutions of torturers. And Chuck Todd was on Morning Joe, said that the discussion about accountability is basically cable catnip. That was the phrase that he used. In fact, Obama now has adopted that phrase and has used it a few times, the cable catnip phrase. And what Chuck Todd was saying is that these calls for accountability are cable catnip because they're a distraction from the important issues going on right now. And he was allowed to just sort of say that. First of all, what is a journalist doing defining for people in this country what an important issue is and what is not an important issue? But secondly, there's a much deeper point to be made about this. How on earth can you say that holding torturers accountable should not be a central part of what's happening in U.S. political life today? Not just in terms of respect for the Constitution, but also because it's the right thing to do morally, but also it is the best insurance we have against future or ongoing acts of torture. The Obama administration is now not on track to close down Guantanamo on the timeline that they originally stated. There is ongoing torture at Guantanamo in the form of military police squads known as immediate reaction forces that are not waterboarding prisoners, but they are responding to the slightest bit of resistance or defiance on the part of prisoners. And a 5-man team of these military police will be sent in to attack prisoners who do something as minor as take an extra styrofoam cup into their cell so that they can use it as reading material, or refusing to get up from their bed immediately. They call in these forces. You have 5 men, each of them assigned to a body part of the prisoner. The head, the left arm, the left leg, the right leg. They douse them twice after giving warnings that they're going to come in. They douse them twice with a chemical agent, come into the cell. The first person smacks the prisoner down with a shield. They take them to the ground and then they hogtie them. In some cases, the Center for Constitutional Rights has documented their clients being urinated on, being made to have the feces of other prisoners smeared on them, having their heads placed in toilets and the toilet being flushed repeatedly, being hog-tied and left out in the scorching hot sun over Cuba. And some acts of torture by these squads were still happening in the early days of the Obama administration. In fact, they continued after Obama issued his executive order ostensibly banning torture. It continued in the form of these military police thug squads at Guantanamo. When President Obama said that they were essentially going to preemptively immunize the individual operatives that conducted these acts of torture because they fell within the legal framework of memos that were approved by the Office of Legal Counsel, of course the torture lawyers by the EU,